Ayan na. Yan na, wala na, nabulol na. Sira na, first seconds pa lang, hindi ko na masabi. Ayan na, yung favorite, super vlogger, major vlogger. Andito na po tayo. Pag-usapan po natin yung latest sa ating very inspiring, very mature, very high-level discourse, politika, and very principled, no? Pag-usapan natin yan. Wait lang mukhang kailangan ko mag-respond a little bit to some of the commentaries. May letter pa nga to the editor sa Philippine Daily Inquirer cool dun sa article ko about 3 scenarios if ever manalo si Bongbong Marcos. So mukhang may mga nagagalit. Hindi kasi binabasa yung instructions Hindi binabasa yung instructions. Sabi ko, scenarios. Ginagawa po natin scenarios. Hindi tayo nagpa-promote ng specific candidate over the other. Kaya nga gumawa tayo din ng scenario for others. Today rin, pag-usapan ko, yung article ko rin, yung column ko, marami naman tayong columns but the one that I try to explain is the one I do for, our own national, local audience. Huwag masyado yung mga ibang international natin. Okay, pag-usapan ko naman yung why is Leni picking up huge endorsement? Because this is the paradox. Kung maniwala tayo sa surveys, wait lang, speaking of surveys, lumabas ba yung Pulse Asia? Parang tapos na po ang March, wala pang lumabas. Usually, alam ko itong mga surveys agencies, mga every 2 weeks or something, that may nilalabas na sila during election time. Ayan, nakita ko lang, biglang may disclaimer na lang yung Pulse Asia na kasi may na-release na kunyari daw Pulse Asia or something na medyo closer yung fight. Disclaimer agad. Ayan tayo. Anyway, wala pa naman yung mga surveys, pero balikan natin yan. Now, assuming the surveys are correct, which is, talagang runaway na yung lead ni Junior, ni perfect attendance, then, bakit may mga allies ni Pangulong Duterte? Bakit may mga even traditional politicians, politikos? Bakit may mga allies ng administration? Bakit si Tatay Digong mismo ay hindi nag-endorse? Kung talagang ganun ka-clear yung frontrunner, syempre, di ba? The basic laws of Philippine politics, talagang ito yung laws of gravity na ito medyo physics na ito ay dun tayo sa panalo, di ba? Yun naman champions of the strong, hindi champions of the weak, ang mukhang motto ng ating mga politikos usually. So why are a lot of them actually not endorsing the front runner, but actually si Leni? So that's an interesting thing to talk about. But before that, medyo sagot naman tayo dito. Uy, medyo may update daw. Ikaw muna Pilipinas, shift support to Leni Robredo na. So, mukhang hindi na si Isko Moreno. Nako po. Mukhang si Isko is losing some ground na there, Yung hope niya to get Tatay's endorsement, and then may isa sa Mindanao, pero si Willie naman dito. So, dalawa dito, tapos isa doon with Sarah. Mukhang hindi nag-work Anyway, ayan. Kasi may nag-send po. Kung nakinig po kayo, yung nagsulat po, even better, no? Kasi may nag-send daw ng letter. I think si Sir Donato Soliven from Antipolo. Ayan, malapit lang naman po kayo sa akin. Parang sinabi niya, interesting read for political analyst, pero scary prospect for regular leaders. Referring to yung article ko a month ago about Marcos Jr. presidency, 3 possible scenarios. Ayon sa kanya, of course, maganda yan for political analysis. I'm sure matutuwa yung mga pundits, etc. I'm not sure he's already referring to my article pa rin, but parang yun ang opening. So parang, I think the implication here is that I'm just doing horse racing analysis here. Para sa kanya, what is more important to focus on is yung overriding issue of the May elections, the existence of a well-funded Marcos propaganda machinery out to disparage rivals and corrupt people's perception and knowledge of historical realities to influence voter preference. Siya po yung nagsabi, hindi ako. They know this but seem reluctant to openly talk about how it irreparably damages the integrity of the elections. Sino bang nire-refer? Ako ba? Ako ba? They appear unruffled that the coming elections have been reduced to a veritable battle between good and evil, with the latter's victory spelling certain doom for the country. Okay. So anyway, may mga nagko-comment dyan na taking issue with yung mga sinulat natin na isa. Hello, parang the following week, may sinulat din tayo, just as we promised. Leni Robredo Presidency 3 Scenarios. You know, part of responsible analysis, and even activism for that matter, is to know what you're fighting for or what you're fighting against. Kaya mahalaga po na magkakaroon ng proper prognostications, proper forecasting, proper analysis. Ito po yung ginagawa natin. So I don't know kung ako pa rin nire-refer dito. Hindi naman ako affected. I mean, yun na, I just want to be clear on the record. Ang akin lang naman, I'm always very clear about what I do. I take my responsibilities, including my super major vlogger responsibilities, very, very seriously. Kasi alam natin, naman, medyo major lang naman tayong vlogger, but I know na binabasa yung ating mga columns, articles. Of course, I teach at university, so, we have students who are listening to us. There's some people who may be looking up to us. So, of course, we take our responsibilities very seriously. So, just to be clear, ito yung clarification ko. In order to better understand the stakes involved in the upcoming race, however, we need to examine political prospects for the country if the current frontrunner maintains his lead until election day. So, dear reader, hindi dear leader, parang North Korean yun. Let me begin with a familiar figure, not former dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr., but instead Russia's modern Tsar Vladimir Putin. So, ang ginawa ko, I grounded it in the literature on illiberal democracy, on the literature on hybrid regimes, and then I look at 3 different scenarios depending on the margin of victory, depending on the cohesion of the opposition, depending on international support, and depending on internal cartel-like negotiations with other centers of power. Of course, kasama dyan, si Sara Duterte, if ever she also wins the vice presidency big time, as some of the surveys suggest. Okay, so very clear ako very clear ako. So, ayan tayo. I hope I suppose, not necessarily ako yung nire-refer, but I have to be very clear about that. Kaya nga, the following week po, may sinulat tayo. Leni Robredo, Leni Presidency, 3 scenarios. Then I also look at the number of factors that will determine what kind of administration na magkaroon tayo if si Leni naman nanalo. So, very clear tayo dyan. I'm not talking about any specific person. Natatawa lang ako dyan. Yung mga ibang tao, they just read one of my articles and then, si Haydar yan, denial, si Haydar yan, give up na. Parang, si Haydar yan, ganun ba? Excuse me, si Haydar yan po ay nagsulat ng 100 articles in the past 2 months lang siguro. Or so. Basahin niyo po lahat yan just to get an idea of the breadth of of the horizons of my analysis. At sabi nga ni F. Scott Fitzgerald, of course, The Great Gatsby, The Beauty and the Damned, yung mga ganon. Tender is the Night, yung mga ganon. Ano yun the best yun Fitzgerald sabi niya, a sign of intelligence is to be able to hold 2 opposing ideas, in some cases, multiple opposing ideas in your mind at the same time, and then not lose your sanity. So, yun ang ginagawa po natin dito. Alright, okay, tatata na, nagagalit na yung mga iba sa atin. Okay, balik tayo dun sa pinangako natin, kasi tayo naman, nag-GMRC, pasado, 100 tayo sa GMRC. Ano bang grading system ngayon? Basta perfect tayo sa GMRC. Ewan ko na dun sa mga paggawa ng GMRC. Tapos may sinasabi, may denial mode na. Sa akin naman mag-reply. Ikaw na nga mag-comment sa thread ko, tapos bigla ikaw hello. Anyway, thread ko yan. So, uy, thank you Thank you kay Lin Ong for your star. Uy, na-appreciate ko yan. That's very, very kind of you. Yan, dapat mabait ka sa akin. I'm doing my best here. Talagang ina-attack tayo from all corners. Ina-attack tayo ng kakamping. Ina-attack tayo ng ka-uni team. Ina-attack tayo ng maraming onion opinion. Ina-attack tayo ng bati mga ka-isko. Minsan nagagalit sa akin. Pina-point out ko lang naman yung nagkakulang na strategy. Sayang, di ba? Sayang. Kasi may potential din si Isko, di ba? Nagalit pa sa akin si GMRC. Mr. GMRC, Shakespearean prose. Yun, no? Okay. So, pag-usapan natin yung article natin today. Why Leni speaking up, huge endorsement. Diba? Parang strange yun Strange yun dahil pag titignan mo yung mga surveys, dapat tapos ng laban. Sabi nga ni Tony Talks, diba? Natapos ng laban. Kaya naman sinabi yung January ba or something. Natapos ng laban, panalo na, may nanalo na. Parang, Ibang klase. Iba. Iba. Ganyan mga Tony Talk style. Yun! So, so kung ganon, syempre expect mo, thanks Margaret for the stars. Yan, thank you. Expect mo naman, kung ganon kagrabe yung agwat, katulad ng sinasabi na ibang surveys, di ano, o di ba kayo kay Len, dun na kayo kaya, no, di ba? Dun na sa front runner. So obviously, kung politiko ka, I'm not talking about yung mga volunteers, yung mga tao na who are supporting Leni out of conviction, out of principle, out of, a very genuine desire to prevent another Marcos regime. I'm not talking about those people. Obviously, those people are voting for Leni or supporting Leni out of principle and conviction. Iba yan. Ang pinag-usapan ko dito is yung mga traditional politicians or yung mga kakam tatay or something. Yung mga ni tatay, mga aliado ni tatay, yung mga iba nga PDP laban executive si tatay nga mismo hindi nag-endorse sa front. So this is strange, right? Because you would expect our politicos are really focused on political survival and being on the good graces of the incoming administration. So ngayon pa lang, tataya ka na kasi ang iniisip mo dyan, yung mga secret pork barrel. Ang iniisip mo dyan, potential appointments. Ang iniisip mo dyan kung LGU ka, yung fiscal resources from the center. Siyempre, kung magalit sa yung incoming administration or next president, medyo lagot ka, di ba? So, realistically, dapat tataya ka doon sa clear na panalo. And yet, for some reason, it's not happening. So, yun para sa akin yung mystery. So, I provided at least 3 key reasons I believe that's the case. Now, we have this paradoxical situation, right? So let me go through them. Of course, dun sa beginning ng article, I talk about yung case ng Hungary and Czech Republic kung saan nag-unify talaga yung opposition. Lahat nag-GMRC, lahat pasado, walang nagpaparinig na nagpapa-GMRC, but instead, actually, they stick to their own words kaysa mag-ano sa iba. Ayan. Ganon sa ibang bansa. Mature, adult po yung mga opposition leaders nila. At real opposition, di ba? Hindi yung nakiki-opposition lang. Tapos pag may sinabi, biglang sinishare ng mga ganon. Ay, opposition ka pala. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, so, dito tayo sa 3 reasons. Bakit Leni is speaking of a lot of endorsement, even though dapat supposedly kulelat na siya, talagang tapos ng laban sa service, etc. Ayan. Okay. I believe there are 3 reasons behind this seemingly paradoxical situation. I mean, kaya ko naman sabihin in my own words. Pero medyo tayo. Since medyo Shakespearean yung mga ibang nag-ano sa atin, let's also be serious. To begin with, pwede na ako mag-audio books na. Mag-practice ako. Practicean ko kayo dito, audiobooks. Leni has emerged as the preeminent leader of the opposition, especially as other opposition wannabe candidates lost steam. Even if some candidates have refused to withdraw, despite earlier suggestions of rallying behind the most competitive opposition candidate toward the end of the race, Leni is forging ahead as the most compelling alternative to a Marcos 2.0 regime. Because even in the surveys that favor BBM and all, clear din si Leni second consistently, diba? So, but yun din ang weird sa akin na parang atakin ng survey yung mga kakamping tapos gagamitin din yung survey to also say that Leni's at least number 2. Parang, you have to be consistent. Consistent. Wag yung mga Google trend. I'm sorry, it's embarrassing. If you, pag pinipilit yung mga Google trend. Punta kayo sa JSTOR, yung mga academic, maglagay ka ng Google trend ganon. Ang kukunti lang ng studies na peer-reviewed na matino dyan. I'm sorry, ayoko ng mga quack analysis. Okay. Don't worry, I'm gonna go to the survey one. No other candidate, let me be very clear about this. And arguably, even the front. See, tingnan nyo, independent ako. I criticize all sides. Hindi ako yung mga vlogger style, attack sa kabila para tuwan-tuwa kayo sa akin. Excuse me, hindi tayo cheap. May tayo sa buhay eh. Okay, so no other candidate, I'm talking about Leni, and arguably even the frontrunner has managed to mobilize the kind of grand rallies that have graced Leni's campaign across the country in recent weeks. Thanks guys for watching my dad's vlogs. As the race enters its final stretch, she has had no shortage of passionate volunteers and devoted donors. Ito yung mga ordinary Filipinos going door to door pushing for the kakamping, pushing for Leni. O, ito, mga ordinaryong tao to, ha. Yung mga nagdo-donate, maliliit lang, but marami sila, talagang crowdfunding, diba? Hindi ito yung mga oligarchs na big donors, etc. na iniisip lang talaga, tataya lang yung mga yun sa mga panalo, pa-safe lang ng mga yun, mga oligarchs na yan, Clearly, the enthusiasm level behind her presidency is reaching new heights. Okay, at least nakikita natin yan in terms of mga huge aerial shot, drone, diba? Mga people coming out for her from Pasig to the north, to the south, etc. Second, fault lines are beginning to appear. Oh, mahalaga ito, to appear within the ruling coalition. The so-called Solid South in Mindanao has clearly closed ranks behind its vice presidential contender. So itong basa ko, yung tinatawag na Solid South, solid yon when one of their own, in this case Sara Duterte, is running for a national office. But once hindi one of their own involved, it's just an alliance, etc., then it's a little bit more fluid situation. Kaya nakikita natin, Sara has the solid support of Solid South. She is holding on to that. But whether the presidential candidate can also, since wala naman presidential candidate, top contender from Mindanao, dahil wala naman si Sara, hindi rin tumakbo na si Bongo, di ba? And in the case of Pacquiao, right, for some reason, parang hindi siya ganun ka, hindi siya ganun ka, he's not resonating as much in Mindanao, which is another big question. Why not Pacquiao? But anyway, pagdating sa presidential candidate, of course, Ferdinand Marcos is not from Mindanao, right? So this is where you see some fault lines emerging, some fracturing within the unit team, supposedly. Sara is getting the solid one, but not so solid with the other side. So my sense is there's a lot of fluidity and a lot of bandwagoning that happened there. Hence, you have some people in Mindanao, actually more than just some, pushing for alternative tandems. So, Congressman Rufus Rodriguez, etc., pushing, for instance, for Rosa, no, yung Robredo-Sara tandem. Now, meron na tayong meta alive on that. Kung viable ba yan? Kung it passes the principle, conviction, values kind of test, etc. I already shared my points of view on that. Pinag-usapan na natin yan. But that's the interesting thing. So, Solid South is solidly behind Sara, but not necessarily when it comes to the presidential race kung saan yung candidate sa unit team is not necessarily from Mindanao. But let's not also forget, there's another element here. If you look at Mindanao, of course, I'm gonna say something a bit controversial here, but as always, very factual. Alam mo naman tayo. I come from Baguio, di ba? So I come from North. At, usually dictators, autocrats, meron silang bailiwick na inaalagaan. Even in the most kapalpakan times, they make sure na alagaan nila yung mga kanilang strategic depth. So, whether it's Assad in Syria, taking care of the certain regions in Syria where his people come from, etc. I can go on and on. Gaddafi taking care of, his own tribe, etc. In the case of Marcos, what we had is he took care of Ilocanos. And Baguio was doing well. The infrastructure was good. You have, Marcos Highway, all of that. Diba? Bahay nga namin sa Marcos Highway. So, nag-benefit ang North during that time. And in fact, the electrification, basic infrastructure development ay mataas sa North. So a lot of people in the North who have relatively, let's say, more sanguine view of the days of dictatorship, the basis for that is because there was a lot of developmental prioritization towards the North. That's a fact, right? Now, does that mean you should turn a blind eye sa lahat ng corruption, kapalpakan, human rights violation? Of course not. But I'm just trying to explain, right? But the case was completely the opposite in Mindanao. So Mindanao actually reversed during the martial law years. There was war, there was conflict, there was destruction, massive repression, human rights violation. And I know our brothers and sisters in Mindanao have a deep sense of history, and there's a lot of historical grievances there. So I'm sure there are people there who have some dark memories of martial law years and may have doubts about supporting. Kaya nga yung PDP laban, di ba? It was forged in the cauldron of resistance against the martial law, 'di ba? Sila Pimentel, etc. 'Di ba? Kaya nga ino-oppose nila Coco Pimentel yung endorsement ng Cusi faction. PDP laban pa ba yan? Dun sa Marcos Jr., 'di ba? So there are people in Mindanao, including some politicos and all, who have certain, dark memories of the martial law period, and it's too searing, and it's too vivid, and it's too pulsating for them to ignore. So, yon. Di ba? Tingnan nyo naman yung ano natin. Hindi lang tayo vlogger. And then, not to mention, Pangulong Duterte mismo nagsabi. Hindi ako nagsabi. Wala akong sinasabi. Neutral tayo, neutral. Sabi niya, weak leader yon. Wala na akong masabi. Si Tatay Digong na nagsabi niyan. Anong gagawin natin ngayon? Ano na? Weak leader daw, sabi ni Tatay Digong eh. Okay. Finally, ito na yung mga Google Trends, people. Tush. I mean, pag nakikita ko yung Google Trends na naman, napapaganon ako. Ayan na naman. Talano nga yung mga talano gold na nga yung kabila, tapos mag-Google Trend pa din dito sa kabila. Ano naman yung level ng diskusyon natin? Nonetheless, ito. Huwag kayong magalit sa akin, ha. Ito. I've been very clear about this. Finally, there's a question of surveys. Makinig. Historically, authoritative polling agencies such as Pulse Asia and Social Weather Stations, they're the two authoritative ones, have done an impeccable job of correctly projecting the likely winners in previous high-stakes races, including Leni's victory in the tightly contested 2016 elections. So if we look at the Pulse Asia survey, yung huling survey nila in 2016, Leni was number 1, but within the statistical margin of error. So very close yung panalo niya na project ng Pulse Asia, yun din ang exactly nangyari. They are, after all, I'll say this, bastions of institutional integrity and professional independence. So I stand by Pulse Asia and SWS. I know the people who are running it. Founder of it, Pepe Miranda, was one of my mentors. Hindi good Machiavellian na. Talagang one of my mentors. So yon. And I'm very proud to have been mentored by people like Pepe Miranda. Okay. All right. Nonetheless, let me be very clear. In our unprecedented climate of fear, disinformation and polarization, ito yung sinasabi kong tatay surveys. However, even the best surveys may have some limitations. Tingnan nyo nga sa Russia, umakyat pa yung approval ratings ni Putin. Ay ibang klase. Bugbog yung economy nila, isolated sila, stigmatized sila. Majority ng UN General Assembly nag-vote against sa kanila. Talong-talo na nga sila dun sa Kiev and others. Umakyat pa yung approvals ni Putin. Now, how serious can we take those kind of surveys? I think the service was done methodologically sound. This was by an independent, hindi to Pulse Russia, basta some independent group. But you have to look at the broader qualitative context, no? We're talking about massive disinformation campaigns. We're talking about climate of fear. We're talking about essentially proto-authoritarian, if some would even say dictatorship. Kunyari, mag-survey ka sa China, tapos tawag ka sa isang tao, gusto niya ba si Xi Jinping? Malamang, sasabihin nila gusto ko si Xi Jinping kasi alam nila, minomonitor sila lahat Tapos meron pa tayong mga reports na minsan pag may nag-survey, meron din mga barangay tanot around the horizon, etc. I have to confirm that. But my point is, I think Pulse Asia and SWS are very veritable, very impeccable institutions of integrity and professionalism. We cannot, however, also ignore the broader climate of fear, disinformation, and polarization, which may influence the willingness of people or the ability of people to have crystal clear ideas on their political preferences. That's a fact. There's a lot of studies done on this. Now, if other people want to ignore it, bahala sila. So clearly, normal dynamics of electoral contestation have been thrown out of the window. Perfect non-attendance mga iba. Parang wala nang pakialaman sa debates ngayon. And there are millions of voters, including first-time voters, who are likely still struggling to make up their minds amid the thick fog of confusion and calumny. This means there could be large numbers of bandwagoners or undecided voters who could still change their minds in the coming weeks. Thus, the actual race could be far more competitive than some of the micro-surveys suggest. So my sense is, I think tama yung sinabi ng iba, it's possible that a lot of also politicos have done micro-surveys, meaning surveys doon sa kanilang bailiwick, sa kanilang probinsya, sa kanilang syudad. And actually, ang lumabas, si Leni yung number one, hindi yung kabila or something like that. Or actually, the race is much tighter. So yun. So see, I mean, I'm fair. I try to give credit to all sides. At the same time, I'm trying to put things into context here. Na sinasabi ko, you have to keep in mind there's a broader qualitative shift in terms of the electoral atmospherics here. Yung climate of disinformation and fear and polarization is unprecedented. We haven't had anything like that before. Even in 2016, it wasn't like this. This is next level. This is crazy. All right. So that is why I think there are a lot of people there who may not be 100% comfortable or sure about yung express preferences nila na reflect ng very legitimate surveys. Yun lang naman sinasabi ko eh. So the race could be actually much closer. And yes, meron naman mga surveys na lumabas na of course dinay ng polls station na medyo mas closer. But I won't be surprised if the actual numbers may be like that, much closer. But anyways, let's see. Yun lang naman yung sinasabi natin dito eh. Overall, ang gusto ko lang talaga sabihin is one thing that is tapos ngayon ko lang sasabihin, may gusto, after all that, parang introduction lang yan eh. Lahat yan introduction lang. O ngayon, sasabihin ko na yung gusto kong sabihin. Inisip ko lang talaga nung kagabi at isang gabi at maraming gabi ko inisip yan. Nasa gabi talaga. Sa araw, busy tayo. Nag-meta tayo is, pag tignan mo yung political elections natin, parang awayan mismo, ang awayan minsan dito is, kung sinong mas hate mo, para doon ka sa mas less hate mo. I mean, is this the kind of politics we want to have? Na kumbaga, kunya i-criticize mo yung candidate ko. Oh, bakit? Yung candidate mo, ganito. I mean, like, magiging ganun ba yung level natin? I mean, is that the direction we want to take? Is that, eto na ba? Yung parang, labasan ng who has more dirty laundry, ganun ba? Who has more skeletons in the closet, or what else can we use? Expressions there. Parang hindi na pinag-usapan yung positive constructive vision eh. Ang pinag-usapan, or merit, or actual achievements. Ang awayan dito, oh, bakit yung candidate mo mahina, ganun. Oh, bakit yung candidate mo mananakaw? Oh, bakit yung candidate mo? I mean, is that democracy? Is that how we're supposed to elect our leaders? So, I mean, I'm not taking anyone's side. Ang akin lang talaga is nagiging ganyan. And then, if may mga candidates dyan na hindi galing sa one of the big camps, atakin nila, ay, trying hard, ay, trapo, ay, secret candidate ng ganito. Kawawa talagang Pilipinas kung ganyan lang talaga tayo. I mean, if this is gonna be the direction of our politics, na magbabatuhan lang ng accusations, ng paninira, etc. Well, iba yung convicted sa courts and all of that. Ibang usapan yan. Those are facts. I'm talking about highly opinionated, yung mga ganun na attacks na. Parang, tapos kung magbibigay tayo ng analysis dito na medyo matino, atakin tayo. Englishero bayaran. Parang, ganun naman eh. Alam mo, there's a proverb. There's a Middle Eastern proverb. There's an ancient proverb that says, the uglier the monkey, the more tricks it has to play. Now, ayoko magsalita, but minsan pansin ko, yung ibang, alam niya na, wala naman silang substantive thing na masabi. Essentially, their substance is paninira lang ng ibang candidates, ibang analysts, ibang experts. Yan lang content nila. They're just spewing hatred and ignorance. Willingly for engagement and relevance. I mean, that's just crazy. Now, I do criticize candidates. And I criticize candidates from different sides. Pero hindi yun ang core ng message natin. Core ng message natin is to analyze the ebbs and flows of our politics. Yun po yung ginagawa po natin dito. Now, sometimes, mas nakaka-eye roll yung isang side sa other side. But at the end of the day, kung magaling talaga yung ibang kandidato natin, di ba tayo nandito? Clearly, there's a problem here. And then, okay, let's talk about the Leni camp. Because I think in the Leni camp, something that is not being talked about is that the Leni camp is a big tent camp. It's a big tent and it's a big camp, no? So, hindi lang siya monolithic. Now, there are quote-unquote, maybe some dilawan there, etc. And we know what we're referring to. Ito yung mga people who are vested in that whole liberal party, whatever, discredited, etc. They're still there. And I don't know why they're still there. At the same time, you have many volunteers, passionate people, progressive people who are there for Leni. for a new kind of politics, no? At, if Leni wants to promise something new, something different, yung balik ang liwanag, etc., yung progressive parts ng camp niya should be more, kumaga the Bernie Sanders part of her campaign rather than the Hillary Clinton side of her campaign should be more vocal, more prominent, more active. Because I'm telling you, to be brutally honest, wala na, discredited na yung isang side. Wala na, yung professing liberal democratic values and in actuality oligarchies are influential, inclusive development is lacking, there's too much deference to some foreign powers. That's not gonna work anymore. Tapos na yun. Nag-move on ng tao. People are looking for something radically different. So if Leni ever wanted to stand a chance, or she still wants to stand a chance, or she still wants to be a robust figure in this country, she has to listen to the more progressive camp, the purely pink camp, let's just call it that way, na hindi na attached dun sa discredited, pa-liberal on the surface, but actually oligarchic or whatever. Yan. It's a one. It's a dos. There were two opportunities to bring about transformative change to the Philippines, to make sure that we have a politics that is inclusive, that is accountable, transparent. How far did we go? I'm not very sure about that. Hence, we had Duterte. But after Duterte, we see people still want radical change. They want something better, something that really transforms their lives and gives them hope about a better future, if not for themselves, for their children, for the next generation. So, hindi ka pwede, yung ibalik mo lang yung dati or gano'n. Wala na. Even si Paulo Duterte, hindi na relevant. People want something radically different. And so far, the Marcoses have managed to, by, how to present themselves as a radical departure or alternative. But this is more like going back to your ex. Na kaya nga kayo nag-break up because there was a reason, right? Na malaking reason talaga. Ang akin lang naman, I think it's time for this country to move forward. And I hope one day we'll have elections. Hindi nangyari tong election na to, so wala. Huwag tayo mag-illusion. But I hope one day we reach a point whereby elections are based actually on merit, on vision for the country, on actual achievements. Hindi lang ginagawa ng kunyari ng tatay niya, etc. Hindi lang nakikisakay doon sa mga established parties. People running on their own merit. And sana yung ordinary people, volunteers, etc., will have more and more say in running truly progressive transformational campaigns. Yun po talagang kailangan natin. Yun talagang kulang sa atin. So no offense, I know may mga naiinis sa atin, mga nagsasabi ng ganito, but yan ang trabaho natin. We are public intellectuals. Yes. Hashtag major vlogger. Okay. But this is the role I think people like me should play, which is to call out excesses on any sides or shortcomings on any sides. Because at the end of the day, ang gusto natin is to nudge the country towards a situation whereby, yun nga, sabi nila, they say don't hate the players, hate the game. Call out the players if they're messing around, but also try to change the game itself. At yun ang gusto natin gawin dito. And in our own little way, through these kinds of meta, alive, whatever, na half joking, half whatever, medyo half, Justin Bieber, let me love you. Yung mga ganun natin. But deep inside, we're trying to really have a serious, evidence-based, and goodwill discussion. Alright? So maraming salamat sa mga nanonood sa atin, sa mga sumusuporta sa atin, sa mga nag-make sure na yung mga trolls dito ay walang pag-asa. Ayan. I really appreciate it. Kung may nagtatroll sa atin, wala pang 2 seconds, bugbog dito. Yeah, kasi, this is not just another pa-vlog or pa-vlog. We are having serious discussions here. This is like a town hall meeting. Unfortunately, dahil sa pandemic, dahil sa everything that we cannot do the kind of town hall meetings we would want to have in any robust democracy. But the least we can do is to use technology to have these kinds of discussions in whatever way we can, in the cheapest way we can. Oo na, totoo naman, gumagastos ako sa aircon, sa wifi, sa online, sa internet, sa FB, sa... Ayan na, nagpaparinig na, patapos na yung speech niya, kaya parinig na siya sa sa mga stars. Yan. Gumagastos tayo ng Wi-Fi. Uy, may party list ng Wi-Fi ha. Wi-Fi party list. Internet. Online. Facebook. Meta Alive. Yan. Alam ko, hindi ano yan. Alam ko ano yan. But, we're trying our best to reach out. Alright? So, I hope na-appreciate nyo po yung ginagawa natin dito. Alright? Thank you so much for your kind support. Thank you so much for being here. Shout out John sa ating mga friends. Thank you, John. Shout out John kay Man. Vieja, thanks sir for sir, right? Yes, thanks sir for supporting us. Thanks Eleanor for sticking around. Ano sinasabi ni Edwin? Sorry, hindi ko makabasa. Ito, may glasses na wala na, matanda na tayo. Ano po? Basahin natin. Ayan, thank you kay Amre, thank you kay Theory, Malabanan. Oo, wag ka mawala ng pag-asa. Ginagawa na nga natin. At basta let's do our own part. The rest, it's beyond our control. Basta let's do our own part. Ang mahalaga, we do our own part correctly. Oh, matanda na. Ayan na naman, may nagagalit na si John. Bias daw si John. Bias. Ayan. Yan, salamat. Thank you kay Cora. Thank you very much. Thank you thank you to Giovanni, to Liama. Yan. Thank you Gina. Lanceta, thank you for joining us. Medyo patapos na tayo, but thank you na humabol tayo dyan. Ayan. Thank you kay Christine. It's a bit more complicated than that, but at least I think the more and more common belief is that the usual orthodox liberal party style of politics is just not gonna sell anymore. I completely disagree na kasalanan nila lahat. I mean, of course, you had 10 years of Arroyo, you had how many years of ERAP, you have had 6 years of Duterte. What about them? Shouldn't they be accountable for yung mga kakulangan?